I want to go to the next story, and the next story has to do with the Taliban. Now, I'm going to be using the Daily Mail. I don't like using the Daily Mail. They are certainly not my first choice. But every single other website that I've been trying to use for the story is paywalled. So I don't really got a choice. So we got to use the Daily Mail. I'm sorry. But it's being reported on Newsweek and other publications as well. I don't think anything has been formally declared, but it's looking like that music is going to be banned in Afghanistan, or at least extremely heavily restricted, very shortly. Now, for many of you, this might come as a surprise. Like, music banned in Afghanistan, that seems a little ridiculous. I know that the Taliban are religious nuts, but music? Yes, even music. Now, if you actually know anything about the Taliban's rule during the 1990s, the late 1990s, you would know that the Taliban actually controlled the country, most of the country, for a short period of time. And during that time period, they actually did ban music. Not only did they ban music, the only music they did actually allow was just like hardcore religious hymns and for use in some like religious ceremonies. And when they allowed that music, the rest of the music that they found, like on cassette tapes, what they would do is they'd grab the cassette tapes, smash them. They took the innards of these cassette tapes and strung them up in trees in this weird performative action. So they smashed everyone's cassette tapes. They actually went out and grabbed them all and smashed their cassette tapes and strung it up in trees in the 90s. Let's read a little bit about this. Taliban spokesperson told the New York Times that the terrorist group will be more liberal than they were 20 years ago. He said that the Taliban would let women return to school and their jobs in the future as long as they wear a hijab head covering. He also denied. Now, we don't know for sure if this is the case. If it is the case, that is a good development. But there has been reports of them turning turning women away from Herat, for example, which has a 60% female school population. There's been some reports about women only up to the age of 9 being able to go to education, segregated classrooms between gender, meaning, of course, the idea that they would be getting the same quality of education as men is not to be expected. Anyway, it is possible that this could happen, but there's a million stories coming out contradicting this, so we need to still wait on that. He also denied the reports that the Taliban would once again force women to stay inside, like they did in 1996 to 2001, and would flog them for misbehaving. Now, that's interesting because recently the Taliban released a statement saying, hey, women right now need to stay in their homes for safety. And if you think I'm joking, let's just Google this right now. Just live fact check myself. Afghanistan women inside home dangerous. Where is it? Afghanistan. Okay, I need to look up Taliban orders women. Orders women stay indoors for their own safety. There it is. Taliban warns women to stay indoors, says their fighters are not trained to respect women. Taliban tells Afghan women to stay home from work because soldiers are not trained to respect them. I mean, at least they're honest though, right? Let me read this title again. Taliban tells Afghan women to stay home from work because soldiers are not trained to respect them. This is the whole, if our fighters saw a woman, they might get beaten away or might start raping. That's basically what they're saying. Like, if their fighters see a woman, they don't know what they'll do. Fear is mounting for women and girls in Afghanistan after the Taliban told working women to stay home, admitting they were not safe in the presence of militant group soldiers. Taliban spokesperson said at a news conference on Tuesday that women should not go to work for their own safety, undermining the group's efforts to convince international observers that the group would be more tolerant towards women than they were last in power. The instruction came the same day that the World Bank halted funding in Afghanistan, citing concerns about the safety of women, within hours of the UN calling for a transparent and prompt investigation of reports of human rights abuses since the Taliban takeover. So they're saying this is temporary, but it does make you think if they admit that their own soldiers are so misogynistic that just the mere sight of women might make them act out. It's hard for me to believe they're going to really create this egalitarian state that they're pretending to create. But anyway, Back to the original story. He also denied reports that the group is hunting down former American allies. That's, of course, a lie. We've seen them, like, execute TikTokers and police chiefs. He added that he hopes the Taliban could work with the international community. But he said music will be banned in the country and women will need a male chaperone on trips that take several days. A Taliban leader has announced that music will be banned in Afghanistan and women will be required to travel with a male chaperone on trips that last several days, even as they promised the Taliban will be more liberal than they were 20 years ago. In an interview with the New York Times, Taliban spokesman said that while women will eventually be allowed to return to work and go to trips to school and hospitals, they would need a male chaperone for the trip to last several days, and the music will be banned in the country. Music is forbidden in Islam, but we're hoping that we can persuade people not to do such things instead of pressure them, he said. Still, he said things will be different under Taliban rule than the previous regime. We want to build a future and forget what happened in the past, he said, rejecting reports that the Taliban is already extracting vengeance on those who oppose them. Now, they're saying that, but I've already done, and if this is a YouTube video, Geek will put that video over here, about them executing a police chief and somebody who was a TikTok comedian because they made him uncomfortable with their jokes. So let's line up this new Taliban future that they're talking about. We're going to be so liberal. We're going to be so great. It's going to be so wonderful. But women, stay in your homes. Our fighters are so misogynistic. If they see you, I don't know what they'll do. Also, once this is all over, you're going to need a chaperone to travel. Also, music is going to be banned. Oof, it's pretty un-Islamic to listen to like Gundam style. I'm sorry to say it's going to be banned. Right? How did I go Gundam style? I went a little further back. It's the Fortnite discussion still in my head. But don't worry, guys. We're not going to start executing people. Unless you're a TikTok comedian, a police chief, or of course, you worked against us. But we'll deny it, of course. And I'm going to get into the story of how they're using the biometric data that we left in the country to now hunt down their enemies. And they're going door to door. We're going to get into that story later. But that is also happening right now. So this liberal future that the Taliban is talking about is one where they admit their own fighters couldn't contain themselves. They're telling women to stay in home for their own protection. We're getting a lot of different reports when it comes to women going to school. Music is getting banned. They're hunting down the political enemies and executing them like TikTok comedians. And this is the liberal future that the Taliban is talking about for this country. You want to know what this made me think of? And I was thinking to myself, like, what's a good comparison for Americans? Because we do have religious extremists in this country who go after things like abortion. By the way, I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but of course abortion's going to be banned. I don't even know if abortion was ever legal in the country. But the only thing I could think of, it'd be like if David Duke was running for president now, and he said, I'm more liberal than the David Duke of the 1990s. Well, I assume in maybe some respect, that's probably true. Maybe he's moved his position 2 inches to the left since then. But it's still David Duke. This is still the Taliban. Just because you move 2 inches, it doesn't really change much of anything. I am going to be really interested to see. I mean, I remember the idea of women politicians was proposed to the Taliban. To some Taliban fighters, to be fair. And they broke out in laughter and told the cameraman to cut because they couldn't contain the idea of female politicians.
So would you believe in the democratic vote, though? So would people be allowed to vote in women politicians? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's like if David Duke was saying he's more liberal, but hey, black people might not want to go out at night because his fighters can't contain themselves, his clan members. Exactly. That's exactly what this is like, yes. He suggested to the New York Times that the Taliban will let women return to their jobs in the future as long as they wear a head covering, and said concerns that the Taliban would once again force women to stay inside or cover their faces are baseless, while he then proceeded to do that. During their previous time in power, Afghan women could only leave the house in a burqa, a shapeless covering which covers the head and the entire body, with only a fabric mesh to see out of. He also said that those with proper travel documents will be able to leave the country, that his regime will not hunt down any former interpreters and all those who worked for the American military over the years, but express frustration at American evacuation efforts. This is a lie. It's already happening. He's just lying to our face. But he said he's still hopeful that the Taliban could build good relations with the international community, saying they have already cooperated with international leaders on issues like counterterrorism. opium eradication, and a reduction of refugees to the West. Well, I'm happy that the Taliban is going to be so progressive and they care so deeply about women that they're not going to let their fighters anywhere near them. Brilliant. Truly, the new feminists of the era. Feminist Taliban thought is going to really take off in the West, I'm sure. Yeah, his remarks come a day after he announced that women should remain inside until we have a new procedure in place, while the Taliban trains its forces not to harass women. I would love to sit down in one of those rooms, by the way, as they train them not to harass women. Okay, when you see a woman, you do not beat them. You don't beat them? I don't know. No, you don't beat them. Do not harass the women. Just sitting down trying to drill that into them. I assume it's kind of like at the Taliban courts. If you don't know about Taliban courts, they're very different to like courts in the West. And that's the type of legal system they're currently trying to enact across Afghanistan. And I watched one of these Taliban courts. It was on Vice. And they allowed Vice reporters to report on it. And what we saw was basically a Taliban leader looking at one of these people that were being accused of a crime. And he said, "Did you do it? Smack! Did you do it?" I assume this training might be something along those lines. Yeah, it's a Squad W training camp. And feminist thought. I'm sure it'll go well. Anyway, sorry for all those who want to listen to Mo Bamba in Afghanistan. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think Lil Nas X is going to be doing a Kabul concert anywhere in the near future.